Good morning, everybody. So each of you have a book, I hope. And how this book came about, really quick, is I wanted to start making prayer journals um, to sell on Amazon. And when I took this assignment, I said, hey, how neat would it be for us to have a prayer journal? And we'll have our lesson in our journal. So the first portion of your journal is our lesson today, and then the remainder is for you to fill out for the rest of the year with your prayer requests, your prayers, and things to think about that you can reflect on later after you fill out your journal. So today I will be covering Amy Beatrice Carmichael. Up on the screen and also in Ladies Slack, I have attached the PDF to the slideshow if it's something that you cannot see. So her travels before she ended up in India started at home in Ireland, England, Japan, Ceylon, Bangalore, and Trineveli, Dohnavur, and some places in Madras where she would travel through for evangelism. So on the first page, we have Matthew 28:19 through 20. And it says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to keep all that I commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." And it's so neat how the same message is that these women were just regular women as we are. And my quote from this was, "From every nation to every neighbor, in tongues known or unknown, among rich and poor alike, with strangers or loved ones, across generations, past, present, and yet to come, we have been sent, as Christ commanded, to proclaim the good news to all creation. We are all women of missions." And that's what these women are leaving behind. They never knew, just like the Apostle Paul, right? They left behind little nuggets for us to glean on to when we're going through things like, okay, this is how they persevered. And so we, with your journal, will do the same. You will journal, and you never know who may pick up your journal one day and see how you persevered through hard times. Amy Beatrice Carmichael, she was born on December 16, 1967, in Northern Ireland in the village of Millau. Her parents were David Carmichael and Catherine Jane Filson, which would later be Catherine Carmichael. Her siblings, Amy was the eldest of 7 children: Norman, Ernest, Eva, Ethel, Walter, and Alfred were her siblings. And this picture is a picture of Amy and some of her siblings, and that is a picture of her home. As a child, Amy had a strong will and a personality that stood out. She was a confident leader, a child of great observation. It is noted that as the great-granddaughter of Jane Dalzell and descendant of the Scottish Covenanters, she naturally had a fiery spirit. Amy also had a deep sympathy for God's creatures, especially the castaways. Her favorite place was the rocky beach where she would lie by the tide pools, gazing endlessly at the living things that inhabited these pools of water. Amy's antics. It was said that if there was any mischief or trouble, it was almost certain that Amy was the ringleader. So these are times in Amy's life that they documented that she got in trouble. And I have some excerpts. Most of my excerpts will come from the book, A Chance to Die, which I recommend that you do read. It's very great. So from this excerpt, it says, "One day, Amy and her 2 brothers were swinging on the garden gate when an idea struck her. They had been told that the seeds of the nearby laburnum tree were poisonous. 'Let's count how many we can eat before we die,' said Amy. It was not long before they began to feel uncomfortable and wonder what would happen next. Gregory, and you'll learn about Gregory, of course, was what happened next. And they were sent to bed to meditate on their sins. Another account is a nursemaid attempted to frighten the children out of their habit of swallowing plum stones by telling them that a plum tree would grow out of their heads. For each stone they swallowed, Amy was charmed by the idea of having an orchard of her very own within such easy access. Deciding that 12 trees would provide her with plenty of plums to eat and to give away, she gulped down 12 stones. When told how exceedingly naughty she was, Amy used to think, if only you knew how much naughtier I could be, you wouldn't think I'm naughty at all. And on another instance, they would have prayer time at home. And so once she found a mouse drowning in a pail of water, just at the moment when the prayer bell rang, she fished it out, hid it in her pinafore, took her place at prayers, and hoped it would not squeak. And it did. So what was life with the Carmichaels? The Carmichaels were middle-class Presbyterians. Amy's father and uncle William managed the family flour mill together, which was located down the road from their homes. They were tough Irish Presbyterians. The children didn't have to second-guess what was expected of them. There was no question in trusting the words of their parents. They were very transparent, matter-of-fact, and had a clear and firm guidelines for raising their children. The children knew and understood the consequences of disobedience. So what were some of the disobediences, the price to pay? When the children would disobey, there were 5 types of punishments that they were to be thankful for. Stand in the corner and face the wall, no outside play, slapped, pandied, which would be your hands paddled, and Gregory powder. And after each, whatever punishment you received, you had to say, "Thank you, Mother." So Gregory powder was this pink powder that would give you a bowel movement. So if you got to Gregory, when you walked into the house and you saw the milk and Gregory on the tray, you knew you were in trouble. But Amy said in her writings, it was a peaceful childhood nevertheless. Its discipline balanced by buttered toast and raspberry jam in front of the nursery fire, the soughing of the wind in the chimney as the children listened to stories, the sweet, sweet sound of a mother singing, pony rides, tree climbing, swimming in the frigid sea. It was a peaceful home in a peaceful village. Amy's testimony long afterwards was, I don't think there could have been a happier childhood than I was. Happier child. The father says no. So as Amy's growing, of course, as parents, we teach our children about prayer. And at this time, this is when Amy is learning about prayer and how God answers prayers. So in Jeremiah 1:5-7, before I formed you in the innermost parts, I knew you. And before you came out from the womb, I set you apart. Verse 7, because everywhere I send you, you shall go, and all that I command you, you shall speak. At the age of 3, Amy learned a lesson that God hears and answers prayers. Amy always admired her mother's blue eyes and thought it would be a good idea to pray for blue eyes, like her mother's. When she woke up the next morning, she found the same brown eyes in the mirror, left with the lesson that no is an answer. So later on, when you fill out your reflections, think about those things that when you ask God for something and it doesn't happen, there's a reason that God doesn't fulfill that prayer, or maybe he has in another way. School's comments in Jesus. At the age of 12, Amy and her brothers were sent to boarding school. Amy struggled with being homesick, but continued with her mischief. With 3 years in boarding school and at the age of 15, Amy attended the Children's Special Service Mission, held in Horgate. When singing the song, Jesus Loves Me, This I Know, for the Bible tells me so, Amy then understood her stance with Christ, and at that moment gave her life to Jesus. The prayers of Amy's parents had been answered. Unfortunately, that would be her last year Financial hardships brought Amy and the boys back home. In a chance to die, it says, the wild Irish girl was quite naughty that time, but felt that the end surely would justify the means. It was the year of the comet, 1882. Amy went on behalf of the girls in her dormitory to request permission of the principal to stay up to see the comet. Certainly not, was the verdict. Missing the celestial show was simply not to be borne, so Amy tied threads to the toes of each of the girls, promising to keep awake and give them a yank as soon as the rest of the house was asleep. At the signal, they all crept up to the attic, holding their breath when a step creaked, and found themselves face to face with the principal and the teachers. But this was before her conversion. At the age of 54, Amy's father, David Carmichael, passed away from double pneumonia. It was the words of Nahum 1:7, the Lord is good and a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knoweth them that trust in him. That encouraged Amy to set herself aside and focus on serving others. She was like a second mother, helping with the household affairs and attending to her brothers and sisters as if they were her own. The great shift in Amy's life. It was one Sunday morning when Amy, along with her brothers and sisters, were walking home from church and encountered an elderly woman who was a beggar. She was stooped under the crushing weight of a bundle of sticks. They stopped to help and soon realized that they were receiving stares from the respectable people who were like them. Amy was embarrassed, but amid her discomfort, something unexpected happened. A verse surfaced in her mind, not as a memory, but with the vivid clarity of a voice spoken directly to her. Gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become manifest. For the day will disclose it, because it is revealed by fire. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. 1 Corinthians 3. In that moment, Amy realized that only what is eternal truly matters. And as a young girl in her circle or her sphere of influence, they like dresses and things like that. And Amy just went the total opposite. She didn't want anything anymore. She didn't want to focus on jewelry, dresses. She was, at that moment, focused on the Lord's work. So that was a big change for her. After Amy's life-changing event, she threw herself into ministry with the children. She started with a group of boys and soon after started the morning watch. She would encourage all children to spend more time in their studies of the Bible. For schoolgirls, there was a weekly prayer held in their homes. She also worked at the YWCA and held a class for the Shawleys. The Shawleys were teen girls who worked in the mills, who could not afford a church hat and had to wear shawls instead. The proper church members did not approve of the common folk. From A Chance to Die, it says, she began about this time to gather the children of the neighborhood to her home for meetings. Henry Montgomery of the Belfast City Mission used to take her through the city streets on Saturday nights. She saw something of the other half and began teaching a group of boys in a night school, always ending with what she called a good night service. Probably her chance to give them something from the Bible, perhaps a gospel song and prayer. She started a program called The Morning Watch to encourage boys and girls to spend regular time each day in Bible reading and prayer. She gave them pledge cards, blue with a gilt edge, which they could sign. When they met on Saturday mornings, each would tell what had helped them during the week, or confess failure to get up on time. It can't have been too dull an hour because two of her brothers joined. Another member recalled that it was always a happy time and everybody loved Amy. She initiated a weekly prayer meeting for schoolgirls in their own homes, then moved it to Victoria College when some of the staff and students joined them. She worked at the YWCA and had a class at Rosemary Street Presbyterian Church for shawlies, mill girls, who were too bored to buy hats, cover their heads with shawls. This was something of a shocker to the proper church members. Not only were they unaccustomed to the presence of such common folk, but the idea of Mrs. Carmichael's permitting her daughter to venture into the slums to fetch them was deplorable. Not one to refuse even unnecessary risk, Amy was more than ready to take risks for the sake of others. She had certainly been sheltered, and she knew it. The Shawleys were not sheltered. What sort of life did they lead? She wondered. Her brother Ernest, working for the railways, knew things she didn't know. She pressed him for information as to the sort of conversation the Shawleys must hear. He wasn't sure she ought to know, but Amy would not be put off. He told her a few things. She intensified her prayers that the girls would grow up pure and good. So that's a picture of what the Shawleys would look like. And when Amy started the welcome, that is a picture of her flyer that she created. And we'll talk about the welcome in a second. So pay attention to this atmosphere that she's having, right, with these proper people. And it's going to carry through her story, and you'll see at the end how God connects it all together. Busy, busy Beatrice. The next couple of years, Amy kept herself busy with projects, networking. They started Scraps magazine. That was a family magazine that after her father passed away, everybody was really talented with writing and drawing. So they decided to start a family magazine for the community to raise extra money. And that would last throughout her year as well. She would attend church conferences. This is where she's going to get this love of missions. She's going to hear about missions at these conferences. She met Mr. Robert Wilson. The kids will call him the DOM, the dear old man, and Hudson Taylor. She opened the Tent Tabernacle, and she ended up calling it the Welcome. In 1889, she moved to Manchester, England, to help a family friend start another organization or another place like the Welcome. And in 1890, she moved to Broughton Grange with Mr. Wilson. So Mr. Wilson, at these conferences they would attend, of course, after each conference, they would say, well, do you have any questions? And her aunts were visiting at the time, and they said, yes, we have questions. So he ended up coming over to their home and having theological discussions with them. But that would not be the last time. He would become a great friend of the family. And so the kids would call him the DOM, the dear old man. At that point, also, the church started to be overcrowded. And of course, it was overcrowded with some of the unmentionables that Amy would bring in. And so Amy prayed for a building. She saw a building in a newspaper. She prayed for it, and the Lord graciously provided the monies and the land for that building. And they called it the Tent Tabernacle, but the name that would eventually be the Welcome. And this is the start of Amy's increase in prayer. She believed that anyone who didn't love God should not give. Only those, Lord, that love you, please let them give. And he did. So she didn't want to use government assistance or anything like that. She would pray for what she needed, and God would provide it. In the 1889, when she went to Manchester, the family member, because they saw how the Welcome was working for the young kids and the women, mostly women, he wanted the same thing there. So her and her mom moved there to help with the women and to start this organization with the Welcome. And then Mr. Wilson, as the years go, they grow together. Mr. Wilson lost his daughter, which was about Amy's age. So it came to be that he asked Amy and her mother if he could take on Amy as his daughter, and everyone was in unison with that decision. So then she moved with him to his place, and let's see, Mr. Wilson's house, and Amy at Mr. Wilson's home. The brothers, his sons, didn't take kindly to it because Amy would bring the riffraff to that house. Uh, so they did not like it at all with her being there. The sacrifice of Go Yi. Once, while listening to Hudson Taylor, the missionary from China, as she had done years earlier, she heard the call to Go Yi, the call to missions. China was her first selection, but Amy developed a bout of neuralgia, and it was determined that she was in no condition to travel to China. Soon after, Amy volunteered for another mission board to Japan. The year was 1893, and Amy was 26. Even though Amy had found her calling, to leave her mother and Mr. Wilson was heartbreaking. So Amy would have these episodes of neuralgia where it's something that affects your nervous system and it's very painful. So this was her first bout of neuralgia and it canceled her very first mission trip to China. She struggled greatly with leaving her mom and Mr. Wilson. And her mother, if in your book, there's a letter from her mother to Amy and it says, "My own precious child, he who hath led will lead. All through the wilderness, he who hath fed will surely feed. He who hath heard the cry will never close his ear. He who hath marked thy faintest sigh will never forget thy tear. He who hath loveth always faileth never. So rest in him today forever. Yes, dear Amy, he has lent you to me all these years. He only knows what a strength, comfort, and joy you have been to me. In sorrow, he made you my staff and solace. In loneliness, my more than child companion. And in gladness, my bright and merry-hearted sympathizer. So, darling, when he asks you now to go away from within my reach, can I say nay? No, no, Amy. He is yours. You are his to take you where he pleases and to use you as he pleases. I can trust you to him, and I do. All day he has helped me, and my heart unfailingly says, Go ye. So that was a beautiful letter that her mom wrote to her to reassure her that her course was right in what she was wanting to do. Amy served in missions for 15 months in Japan. During her travel and stay, she led the captain of the ship to Christ. So in their travels to Japan on this boat, they would sing hymns, her and the other missionaries. She wasn't alone. And the sailors would listen to them sing hymns. And of course, she would give the gospel. And one of the captains came to Christ. She learned valuable lessons about missionaries. Amy was very strong-willed. And the other missionaries there, she felt that as they were not letting go of the Western culture. When Amy went to mission, she wanted to immerse herself into where she was. For instance, she wanted to wear a kimono. And they were like, no, you can't do that. So they battled back and forth, and eventually they came to the agreement that they would wear them on Sundays. She wanted to be in the villages. She wanted to sleep in the villages. If they were sleeping on the floor, Amy wanted to sleep on the floor. And that was a clash with the other missionaries that were there because they didn't want to let go of their comforts. And Amy wanted to be fully into whatever or whoever they were evangelizing to. So that was one of the things. Also, her health, the neuralgia, just the weather there had her sick constantly. But this is also like it was like a training ground for her. She became good friends with her translator, Miss Saki-san. Amy struggled with the language, and with her being a just go, go, go person, she was like, Misaki-san can translate, and I'll just go. But they were like, no, you need to learn the language yourself. So her and Misaki-san would have their moments. She's like, oh, Amy Wilson, please learn, please take time and learn the language. And she did eventually. She found her Japanese shawlies. So, like I said, Amy went out into the depths of the darkest places, found the girls there, and she evangelized to them as well. And increased in her faith through continued prayer. At this moment, this is when Amy is really amping up prayer. One of her experiences, one experience in particular showed how greatly she needed it. Early one morning, she was told that a man nearby was possessed by a fox spirit. The spirit was worshipped in Japan. Shrines were dedicated to him, and stone foxes were often set side by side with Buddhas. What this demon was doing to the poor man sounded very like the New Testament stories. Wherever he is, it gets a hold of him, throws him down on the ground, and there he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth. Amy went straight to her room and asked the Lord why she couldn't cast him out. Because of your unbelief, was his answer. She spent hours on her knees before she asked Misaki-san if she believed the Lord Jesus was willing to cast the devil out of the man. Misaki-san was startled, but after some thought and prayer, declared that she believed. Amy's impulse was to go at once, but she remembered that the disciples were told that such a demon required fasting as well as prayer. So she and her friend did both, having sent a message in the meantime to ask if they would be permitted to see the man. Yes, came the answer, but he was very wild. He had 6 foxes and was tied up. After some hours, of which Amy said only that they were solemn, the two went to the house. Stretched on the floor, fastened crosswise on 2 beams, bound, strapped hand and foot, his body covered with burns and wounds, lay the man. Little cones of powdered medicine had been set on his skin and lighted. They burned slowly with a red glow. Nothing has so far daunted the fox spirits, but Amy called to mind that the power of God had conquered a demon whose name was Legion. She told the crowd in the room that her mighty Lord Jesus could cast out the 6 spirits. At the name of Christ, a fearful paroxysm took hold of the man. Hellish power was loosed, and blasphemies, which even she could recognize as blasphemous, poured from the man's mouth. He struggled, was forcibly held down. The women knelt and prayed. The struggle increased. Satan seemed to be mocking them. Can you think how I felt then? Amy wrote. The Lord's name dishonored among the heathen, and I had done it? Far, far better never to have come. But she heard the shepherd answer, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. All power is given unto me. These signs shall follow them that believe. In my name shall they cast out devils. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Amy assured the wife that God would answer, and the two went home. An hour later, a message came. The foxes had gone. The cords were off. The man was himself again. Next morning, he asked to see Amy and Misaki-san. Unrecognizable except for the burns, he offered them a spray of scarlet pomegranate blossom and sugared ice water. He and his wife gladly knelt with the women as they prayed, joining in with hi, hi, or yes, yes. Amy's letters to Keswick magazine, The Life of Faith, are full of stories of prayers answered. Now, when I started reading the story, I was like, I know Amy is not going to try to get this devil out of this man, but it showed that she was dependent on God and that she went to prayer for this situation. Let's see. So that's Amy and Misaki-san, her translator. So the religion in Japan at that time, they believe in the Shinto, the Buddhism, Confucianism, and there was some Christianity there at the time. So while she was there, Amy experienced a festival Matsuri festival. So this festival in Japan is when in the middle, I don't know if you can see it, there's like this temple, this huge temple that they build, and they carry it through the town during this festival. And it's said that they are carrying the god in the temple. So those are some of the things that she got to experience while she was in Japan. The dear old man. While in Japan, Amy fell ill again and had to travel to China for treatment. During her short stay, she received word from home that Mr. Wilson, the dear old man, had a stroke. This changed her plans for staying in Ceylon. So from Japan, she gets sick, and they say, okay, we'll get you help, we'll get you rest, but we'll send you to Ceylon, and then after you feel better, you'll come back. But Amy had a feeling that she wasn't going to go back to Japan again. And then she receives this letter that Mr. Wilson had a stroke. She immediately begins her travels back home. Amy's family, friends, and especially the Dom were overjoyed to see her. With much persuasion, Amy's first book, From Sunrise Land, was published. It was a collection of her letters from Japan. Amy's stay would be short. She still had the call for missions, and on October the 11th, Amy set sail for India. So when she wrote these letters back home from Japan, they decided to put them together, and that was her first book, From Sunrise Land. It is a great book to read also, so I would suggest that as well. And these are really great lessons, because one of the things that I have for you here is like, when our paths are redirected, how do we respond? Do we say, Lord, I'm willing whatever direction you send me, or is this I can't believe this, my life is over? So just some reflections to think about. New and different world. Upon arrival to Madras in 1895, Amy would quickly see that the atmosphere in India was drastically different from Japan and China. Due to the British rule, life was difficult for most people. Some Indians gained from new roads, railways, and jobs, but more suffered from poverty, unfair treatment, and famine caused by British policies. The most disturbing thing to Amy was that missionaries and Christians had adopted this worldly living. Amy immediately began evangelizing and forming relationships with the local community. So she goes from Japan, which is not that westernized. There's some Christians there, but not very many. And then she comes to India, and just imagine this port with all these people and all these ships, and everything's hustle and bustle, and you have these trading companies that go in under the guise of being trading companies, but they really are looking for the jewels and the gold and things like that. So there's a lot of corruption with the companies and the government, the police, and then she sees that some of our missionary Christians are taking part in this corruption as well. Amy would eventually connect with Thomas Walker and his wife. Thomas would mentor and help Amy with her Tamil lessons. Evangelism was challenging. There was the obstacle of caste to face. Some opposed due to the life of an Englishman or woman, and those who did come to faith met death. It was not all grim. There was a little harvest of fruit here and there, and soon Amy would find her true calling. So, of course, Amy does not like learning languages, and she had to learn a new language, Tamil. Now, as I'm reading A Chance to Die, I'm like, so is this Tamil a language, a place, or custom? And it's all of it. It's the language, it's the location, it's their customs. And let's see. So, Go Ye versus the culture. The culture there was really what they call the caste system. And this is the foe. This is the foe against anybody evangelizing in India. So the summary of the caste system. The caste system is a traditional social hierarchy in India, historically linked to Hindu religious law. It divides society into hereditary groups, each with specific roles, occupations, and social duties. People were born into their caste, and mobility between castes was extremely limited. At the top were priests and teachers, followed by rulers and warriors, then merchants and farmers, then laborers and servants. Below these groups were the outcasts, or the Dalits, who were excluded from the system and often given the most impure or degrading tasks. So the four main caste systems, well, it's five, but the four main ones were the Brahmins, the warriors and the rulers, the merchants, traders, farmers, and the laborers and the servants. The Dalits, or the untouchables. So this job was like, you are the trash man, you are the person that handles burial, you bury the bodies. So even, it's so crazy because so here, it shows you every image that I tried to find, it always separated this lower group. That's how bad it was. They were the outcasts of the caste. And the caste system, if you're a Brahmin, you cannot be with another group. So even from the higher tiers, whatever you were, you stayed within that group. You didn't intermarry with another group or anything like that. So things families did to stop conversion. First, it was emotional pressure. So they're finding out that you are talking to Christians. They would pressure you by shaming, pleading, or cursing the convert for disgracing caste and family honor. Then there was isolation and seclusion. They would lock their daughters away, preventing contact with Christians. There were beatings and torture, physical punishment, flogging, tying up to force renunciation, poisoning attempts. Castes were families where secretly poison food or drink of converts. And Amy said that there were 3 types of poison. So there was just your regular poison, and then there was a slow poison that would work over you over time. And then the third poison was something that would affect your mental state. So it would make it seem as if you were going crazy. And those were the things that they would do to their family members if they were seeking to learn about Jesus. Forced marriages, marrying off daughters quickly to prevent them from choosing Christ. So if they found out that their daughter was interested talking to Christians, or they would marry them off and send them to another village. Brainwashing, religious indoctrination, intensifying ritual duties, temple visits, or bringing in priests to reclaim them. Excommunication, banishment, treated them as dead, casting them out of home and village, and then public shaming, mocking, or cursing the convert in front of neighbors to reinforce community pressure. There was one instant where there was because like we said, they're separated, so there was a Brahmin village where you couldn't even look out the gate. The women couldn't. This society was, over women, so the women couldn't look out the gate, and if they did, they were killed. There was one gentleman that said that she will never leave, or she would leave dead. That's how serious it was to talk to a Christian at that time. Let's see. We'll skip that. So another thing that she noticed or experienced is when a woman became a widow. So when a woman became a widow, immediate change of status, the woman is stripped of her former identity as a wife and loses her place of honor in the household. She becomes a burden socially and spiritually, viewed as inauspicious, someone who brings bad luck. Loss of jewelry and color, All ornaments, necklaces, bangles, earrings are taken off, often violently. Bright clothing, saris in red, yellow, and green, is replaced with plain white or drab cloth. This symbolizes her death alongside her husband. She is living but socially treated as if she has no life left. The shaving of her hair is shaved off, marking her as permanently disgraced. This served as a visible brand of widowhood, making it impossible to remarry or regain dignity. Religious blame. Widows are often considered to have caused their husband's death through bad karma or sin. Instead of being pitied, they were shamed and sometimes despised, even by their own families. Social restrictions. Forbidden from attending weddings, festivals, or other happy gatherings. Kept away from religious rituals since they were seen as unlucky. Often reduced to menial labor in their in-laws' homes or left to beg. Remarriage in most higher castes, not allowed. A widow was expected to live in austerity and chastity for the rest of her life. In some lower castes, remarriage was permitted but still carried stigma. And this is what's so surprising. What was the age range of this? Because girls were married off as children, sometimes as young as 8 to 12, they might be widowed by 10, 12, or 15. Many had never even lived with their husbands before becoming widows. Adult widows also existed, but Amy emphasized the tragedy of the child widows. Girls who lost not just their husbands, but any chance at a normal life before life had even begun. So can you imagine, you're 8 years old to be married, and then he dies, and then they blame his death on you, and you're stripped of everything. Most of the girls were locked in their rooms all the time. They were let out to maybe eat or whatever, but then back in the room they went. And this was until they died. This was the way that they lived. Caste was everything. Caste was their life. So Amy tells of a story when she was out evangelizing. Of a convert. She was receiving the gospel, and she was listening to what they were saying, so they would come more often to her home. But one day, for the first time, she did not care to read. I remember that day so well. It was the time of our monsoon, and the country was one great marsh. We had promised to go that morning, but the night before the rivers filled, and the pool between her and us was a lake. We called the bandyman and explained the situation. He debated a little, but at last, well, the bulls can swim, he said, and they swam. We need not have gone. She was out. Out, or not at home, today is a phrase not confined to society circles where curiosity counts for more than truth. I am in, but I do not want to see you, would have been true, but rude. This was the first chill, but she was in next time, and continued to be in until after a long talk we had. When again the question rose and had to be faced. Can I be a Christian here? It was a quiet afternoon. We were alone. Only the little grandchildren were with her, innocent, fearless, merely little creatures running to her with their wants and pulling at her hands and dresses as babies do at home. Their grandmother took no notice of them beyond an occasional pat or two, but the childish things with their bright brown eyes and little fat, soft clinging hands went into the photo one's memory took and helped one the better to understand and sympathize in the humanness of the pretty home scene. That humanness which is so natural and which God meant to be. I think there is nothing in all our work which so rends and tears at the heartstrings within us as seeing the spiritual clash with the natural, and to know that while caste and bigotry reign, it always must be so. We had a good talk. I want to be a Christian, she said, and for a moment I hoped great things, for she, as the mistress of the house, was almost free to do as she chose. I thought of her influence over her sons and their wives and the little grandchildren, and I took my And I think my face showed hope I had, for she said, looking very direct at me, by a Christian, I mean one who worships your God and ceases to worship all other gods. For he alone is the living God, the purveyor of all and provider. This I fully believe and affirm, but I cannot break my caste. Would you continue to keep it in all ways? How could I possibly break my caste and continue to smear Siva's sign on your forehead? That is indeed part of my caste. More especially part of it, I knew since she had received the initiation. Then the disappointment got into my voice, and she felt it and said, "Oh, do not be grieved. These things are external. How can mere ashes affect the internal, the real essential, the soul?" It was such a plausible argument, and we hear it over and over again, for history repeats itself. There is nothing new under the sun. I reminded her that ashes were sacred to Siva. "I would not serve Siva," she answered me, "but the smearing of ashes on one's brow is the custom of my caste. I cannot break my caste." Then she looked at me very earnestly with her searching, beautiful, keen old eyes, and she went over ground she knew I knew. She reminded me what the requirements of her caste had always been, that they must be fulfilled by all who live in the house. And she told me in measured words and slow that I knew she could not live at home if she broke the laws of her caste. But why make so much of trifling things? For matter and spirit are distinct, and when the hands are raised in prayer, when the lamp is lighted and wreathed with flowers, the outward observer may mistake and think his action is puja to Agni, but God, who reads the heart, understands and judges the thought and not the act. Yes, my hand may smear on Siva's ashes, while all the same moment my soul may commune with God the Eternal, who is only God. So as that conversation goes on, pretty much she is wanting Amy to say, yes, you can live with your caste and serve God. But during this conversation, she knows, they both know, she knows that it's no, you cannot have caste in God. And that's how strong caste was. That is your life. And they met much opposition. We got 5 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up. But as Christians, they met much opposition because of the caste system. But Amy would continue to evangelize. Eventually, they would wind up in Dohnavur. Dohnavur was a location, and get this, this is so important, I found this out later. Dohnavur was a location in India that someone had established for a sanctuary because the Christians began to be persecuted and they needed a safe haven. So Dohnavur became a safe haven for Christians. Now think about this. You're in India and you have a safe haven in India. That's, I don't know if it's connected with you, but in their country, they had a safe haven, and that just shows how God was continually protecting them. So in Dohnavur is where they would rest during their travels. And one night, a little girl was brought to her named Preena. Preena was I'm going to say it right, Devadasi in a temple. So when your husband would die or something tragic happened in a mother's life, they would offer their children or their girls to the temple. And so they would live out their lives in the temple, taking care of the god in that temple. And then there was also exploitment that would happen in the temple during this time. So Preena escapes, and before she escapes, she hears the temple people talking about this Amal. Amal is mother in India, and they would say, that child snatching a mall. So they would say that to scare the kids. But Preena was like, show me where this child snatching a mall is, because that's who I want to be with. So the first time she tried to escape, they burned her hands with irons, hot irons. And when she heard about the Amal, she determined that she was going to escape that night. So Prina escapes, runs into one of Amy's women that go out evangelizing with her. It was really late, and she was going to take her back to the temple, but she said, no, come on, let's go. We'll continue to the village. Amy's in town. She wasn't supposed to be in town that night, and she introduces Prina to Amy. Prina runs to Amy, jumps in her lap. Amy embraces her and kisses her, and Prina says, who is this woman that kisses me like my mother? And from then on, she was Amy's for the rest. That was the moment, because Amy is focused on evangelism. She's not focused on children right now. Prina caused the Donovan Fellowship to come out. She now focused on rescuing the girls from the temples. So, I mean, just thinking about that, like, she was going to be sent back to the temple, but God worked in such a way that everything connected for Amy to be there that night and for Prina to be able to escape to come to her. And so from Prina, more children came to Donovan. They started building buildings, nurseries. They went through the ups and downs. But through it all, Amy continued to pray for everything they received. Not one thing did she ask anybody for. Everything, every rupee they received, every person that came, she would go to God in prayer. And just somehow somebody said, hey, I was supposed to be sending you money, and I kept, putting it off. And then one day she was like, I just need to stop and send her this money. Now, this money that was sent on that occasion, there was a child that was going to be sent to the temple, and if they had not sent the money at the right time, the child would go, and there was no chance of getting the child back. So Amy's like, we don't have this money. How are we going to do this? And then that letter came with the exact right amount of money to get that baby from the temple. Amy built nurseries, cottage home schools, a dairy farm, rice lands, tailoring departments, kitchens and laundries, workshops, and a hospital. She would have an accident later in her old age, and she was bedridden for the rest of her years, but she still directed the fellowship, and that is when she wrote her books. I think she has like over 30 to 60 books that she wrote. But she was literary also. So she was journaling through her years. She would write every week. So that's how she was able to accumulate these letters and books and things like that. There are more, but time is not my friend right now. It was very hard to compile. She has so much. I get one of those the papers that you have are a list of her books. On the back are free resources. So during my searches, I found places that have free ebooks and audiobooks of her stories. So just really quickly, this is how, okay, the two pictures here are how I imagine the caste system after I got through studying it. Like, it's just this huge monster that Satan had to cover that place. And this is how Amy described caste as a hydra-headed monster. That is Thomas Walker. In the middle, he was her mentor when she got to India. She didn't like Thomas at first because he was kind of bullheaded too. Panamal, here at the bottom, was her assistant and her friend to the end with the babies. The starry cluster at the top were her evangelizing sisters that would go out with her evangelizing. And that picture over here, I know you can't see very well, is one of the camps that they set up in. Donovan, where she would end up building the fellowship with everything for the children, is the land here. And this is the building where she says you can always give without loving, but you can never love without giving. So that's one of the buildings in Donovan. More buildings. That's the prayer hall on the right. Prina is on the left, here and here. That's her first child. These walls are around the temples. She would talk about how she wanted to get into those walls to talk to. It was very hard for her to talk to women, even the free ones. Like, they were heavily guarded. They would, if you were able to sit on the veranda, that was a good day. So these are the temples where the children would be sold to when they were babies. A festival. So Amy started out with girls first, and then she transitioned to boys because she found out about the system with the boys during this festival. And this is another festival where they have the god in this structure. And she would see boys dressed in pink on these structures, and then that's how she found out about the exploitation of the boys. Boys at Donover. The babies, Amy and the babies. Babies. These are pictures of Amy. She took them to the beach one time and just the kids hanging out. These are from her book, Things as They Are. The version that we have now don't have the pictures, but if you go to the free one, you'll see the pictures from Things as They Are. And this is just life in India, pictures of people and the babies. Lots of babies. So this is how I imagine Amy. In God, she was strong, but on her own, she was very weak and depended on him greatly. Thank you so much for